Hey, good morning. How you guys doing? Fantastic. Happy Father's Day weekend, by the way. Happy Father's Day. And before we jump in today, I want to say, today, this weekend's Father's Day. Next weekend is actually the official beginning of summer. June 20th this year is summer equinox. And so beginning next weekend is when our summer service times change. And that means next Saturday night, our Saturdays are going on summer break. There's no Saturday night service. And for the first time ever, we're actually changing our Sunday morning service times as well. We're pushing it forward a half an hour to 9 and 10:30. So next Sunday, the services will begin at 9 and 10:30, not 9:30 and 11 a.m., or for some people 9:45 and somewhere close to noon, or whenever people show up. But so 9 and 10:30 a.m., and check this out, we're going to have some valuable prizes that we're going to give away to people who are in the room early and on time and so forth, so that'll be fun. That all begins next weekend. But hey, it's Father's Day weekend, so because it's Father's Day weekend, I thought I'd start us out with a question that I think is a relevant question, and it's this right here. What do you think it really means to be a man? Like, what does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be a real man? And we all have answers to that question, whether you're a man or not. I mean, we all have answers, ideas, thoughts that come to our mind when we think of that. Some of them are conscious, some of them really not so conscious, things that have just been imprinted on us, often from our families of origin, whatever your dad or father figure was like or wasn't like, and how you aspired to or aspired away from, whatever that was, what your mom had to say about men and what that means. Like, we get imprinted with some of these ideas very, very early on. Then, of course, like, social and cultural inputs are so powerful, and the icons that we've grown up kind of thinking about, and the tribe that we surround ourselves with. And it's like real men always, or real men never. Real men should, or real men shouldn't. Real men do, or real men don't. In fact, here I'm going to date myself. Growing up in the 70s and 80s, there's a really popular book that came out right at the early 80s. Maybe some of you are familiar with it. It became this whole kind of saying, this thing like real men don't eat quiche. I won't ask you to raise your hand because then you're dating yourself. But I mean, that was always a problem for me because I actually kind of like quiche, because I'm thinking, okay, we got eggs, we got cheese, and we usually have some kind of breakfast meat like ham or sausage in there, and then maybe some veggies like spinach, but Popeye ate spinach, and then you throw that, because he's a real, and then you throw that in a pie crust and bake it? I mean, come on. But apparently, so it was like this tongue-in-cheek kind of satire on stereotypes of masculinity and stuff like that, but kind of funny, and it became a whole thing back in the 80s. But this idea, like real men, like what is a real man? What do real men do or don't do or know how to do or so forth? And we all have ideas and answers of what it means to be a man. And here's the thing, the way we answer that question actually matters. It means something. And for guys, the way we answer that question, it forms kind of like a bullseye in our lives that we are either aspiring to or feeling like we are falling short of. And dads, the way we answer that question, it ripples not only into our own lives, it ripples into our kids' lives. As fathers, that ripples into our sons' lives, it ripples into our daughters' lives and what they think it means to be a man. What does it mean to be a real man? And to answer that question, to truly answer it, we actually need to take a step back and ask what I think is a bigger and more important question. What does it mean to be a human? What does it mean to be a real human? And so today we're in part 2 of this series called Field Notes, Vital Information for Your Journey of Faith. And we began thinking about this series earlier in the year, asking ourselves this question like, what are some of the most important things? Like, what are some of the most important ideas, the most important practices? What are some of the most vital things that people need to know for their journey of faith? And this is a series about some of those things that we think are just really, really vital things, which I think makes this series pretty important. You might say pretty vital, if you will. And so Scott kicked us off last week setting up the series. Of course, Lyle did the first week, but he set it up before that saying, hey, it's summertime. You're probably going to have some breaks, some vacations. I'm sure you will. Hope you will. Maybe get out of town. But when you're in town, I really hope that you will be here all summer long for this series, because I really do believe that the things we're going to be talking about are really, really vital things. Now, to me, personally speaking, one of the most important things, in fact, one of the biggest and most important ideas that we all carry around in our heads is our idea of ourselves, our identity, like what it means to be us, what it really means to be ourselves, to be truly who we are. And this idea is so big. I'm actually going to take 2 weeks to talk about it. So today is like a part A, and next week is a part B, and you are not going to want to miss part B. Now, oddly, this really basic thing is something that we're inclined to get very confused about, because there are many false versions of myself, false selves, if you will, that are in me competing for my identity. For example, one false self, for example, is the me I pretend to be. The me I pretend to be. And here's the deal. We all want to be known for something, whether you've not put much thought into it or you put like way too much thought into that. Like, we all want to be seen in a certain light. We want to be thought of by the people who see us we want to be thought of in certain ways. And we all have gaps between how we want to be seen by others and how we sometimes feel about ourselves. And therefore, we all pretend. We all pretend to some degree or another. We all hide parts of ourselves, like I'm going to show this part of myself, but I'm not going to show that part of myself. And by the way, appropriate levels of disclosure is a good thing. Like, emotional intelligence is a good thing. But I'm going to project this image, but I'm going to hide this. And that is just a natural thing to do for human beings, to manage our image, to explain, maybe over-explain, to defend, to deflect, to lie. The research on how often people lie is just mind-blowing. There's the social media me. There's the me that's fit for public consumption. There's the strong front, got it together me. Often in church, there's the religious, well-behaved, holy version of me. And then there's the me behind closed doors. There's the me that drove up in the car 5 minutes before I got here and what that version of me was saying and doing. There's the me that's inside my head. And those versions of me are often very different versions of me. There's the me I pretend to be, and that's often related to the me I think I should be. The me I feel like I should be, like this ideal self I'm supposed to be more, I'm supposed to be less of that. And the source of that right there comes to us from a lot of different places. Again, our families of origin, the scripts that we were given growing up, again, about like what it means to be a man or what it means to be a woman or what it means to be a success. And of course, there's social media that's feeding this constantly, the world around us, the people in our lives, the expectations they put on us, and the constant comparison of ourselves with everybody else, the constant comparison of who's next to us, and they look like they're doing a little bit better, they're running a little faster, they're getting ahead, or they're further along, and I should be more. I shouldn't feel this way. I shouldn't feel this sadness. I shouldn't feel this anger. I shouldn't have this weakness. I shouldn't have these doubts. I should be more of. I should be more of a leader. I should be more confident. I should be more firm and strong with people. I should be more caring. I should be more soft with people. I should be more studious and contemplative and bookish, or I should be more gregarious and outgoing. I should. Now, should can be an important word for our spiritual growth. It can be aspirational. It can be this word that pulls us into a better future, but should can also be a killer. It can be a killer, a word that constantly forces us onto a path that isn't ours, into the lane that we aren't meant to run in, and it often leaves you feeling just inadequate, like I'm not enough. It's like what Brené Brown in her book Daring Greatly calls the epidemic of scarcity. The epidemic of scarcity, the prevalence that she finds in her research of just people feeling this not enoughness. It's just not enough. I'm not enough. I'm not doing enough, not having enough, not being enough. Like, what is wrong with me? I'm just not enough. And should is a word that drives that feeling of inadequacy, of not being enough. And the next one is kind of tricky. I think it might be the hardest to see and really the hardest to be free of. And I'm going to call it the me that has failed to be. The me that is the false, this is the false self that's just caked over with all the layers of everything that's messed up about me and everything that's broken in me, all of my dysfunctions and addictions and my habits of mind and mouth, right? And my defects of character and all that ugly ego and pride and the fear and the resentments. And this is so deceptive because I can just begin to tell myself, that's who I really am. That stuff is just what's true about me. That's the way I am, and I just have to be real. That's my authentic self. In fact, complete this sentence in your mind, if you will. It's just like me. It's just like me to say too much. There I went again. Man, it's just like me to do that, and I wasn't going to do it. It's just like me to eat too much, spend too much, drink too much, work too much. It's just like me to be negative and controlling. There I did it again. It's just like me to just worry so much, to worry a lot, to lose my temper, to blow it, to screw up, to fail, to let people walk all over me. And that script, or those scripts that we have, they become a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like, that's just who I am. That's just who I am. That's the way I am. And hear me on this. It is a lie. It is a false self. Do not miss next week. Though some of those things might be or might have been true about you, it is not who you really are. It is not the real you, and it is not what is most true about you. So, what is most true about you? What does it really mean to be human, to be you, to be the real you? And to get at this, I want to take a look at one of the most important stories in all of Scripture. In fact, it's the story that's told first, as if like this is the first thing you need to know. This is vital information for the journey ahead. This is what is most important for you to know. And it's a story that's referred to and then riffed on over and over again throughout the story, as if everything else that happens in the story is like building upon this, building off of this seminal primal story. And the story begins with a famous line that you may have heard before. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And the story opens with God, a being so brilliant and huge and powerful and creative and efficacious, and he's generating into existence all that we can see and all that we can't see, and the laws of physics that make it all possible, the law of gravity, the strong and weak nuclear forces, and so forth. And what he's doing is, in the scene that follows, he's bringing order and beauty and structure and goodness out of chaos and nothingness. And the most often repeated word in those opening scenes is the word good. It's just good. What he's doing is so good. And then at the climax, the pinnacle of creation on day 6, the rhythm of the story changes to draw attention to something really special that is about to happen, something brand new. And then God said, let us make, the word here is Adam. Adam is actually the word for human. Let us make mankind, or human, let us make Adam in our image. And in this opening story, in the document we refer to as Genesis, human beings are the pinnacle of all of creation, the greatest work of art, but not just the pinnacle, they are the image of God. Now, this story is told in Hebrew. We translate it into English and many other languages, and the Hebrew word in the story for image is the word tselem. And I want us to say tselem out loud. You got to put the T before the S, okay? We can do this on 3. 1, 2, 3. Tselem. It's the word for, it's a statue, it's an idol, it's an icon, it's an image. And a tselem, or an idol, an idol is a statue, right? That's what it is. It's a visual, physical representation of a thing or a person, a king sometimes, or a deity. And that statue, that tselem, would be often placed in the sacred spaces, the God chambers of a temple or a shrine, so that the worshiper, the person coming, could connect with that God. And it was the tselem was thought to represent, or to actually mediate, if you will, the presence and the power of that God. And so, in the beginning of the story, God makes images of himself. He makes tselem, and then he says, hey, you are to make no images, no idols, no statues out of any created things to worship, because on the one hand, the creator God cannot be reduced to anything that is in creation. It is beneath him to do so, and just as importantly, we are not to do that because God has already made images of himself. The only appropriate images of God in all of creation are living, breathing human beings. In other words, you are not to bow down to any other image of God, because you are intended by God to be the walking, living, breathing representation to the world around you of the dignity and the nobility, the goodness, the wisdom, the grace, the efficacy, the glory of God. You are, and every other human being you will ever see. That's what it means to be human. That's what it means to truly be human. That's what it actually means to be yourself. Now, this representation idea of representing God in creation is then picked up with the next statement. So God said, let us make Adam, human, in our image, in the likeness, in our likeness, so that they may rule over everything else that has been created. And part of representing God, part of being the image of God, the tellem of God in the world is this idea of ruling over things. Ruling over things meaning to steward and to care for and to exercise responsibility and leadership over all that God has made. One Hebrew language scholar, translate this idea of ruling this way. It is to actively partner with God in taking the world somewhere. It is to actively partner with God in moving things forward, taking creation forward, making things better, to bring order and beauty to chaos and the disorder of things. The word that is sometimes used in conjunction with this in the story is the idea of subdue, to subdue chaos and bring order and beauty and structure to it, which, by the way, is exactly what we see God doing in the opening scenes of the account. And that is now what we are to do, to work and create and build and serve and help and love and bring beauty and goodness to everything around us. And then the story breaks out in this little poem. At this point, a little song, and it says this: so God created Adam in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. At the beginning of the story, we are told this is what it means to be human. This is actually what it means to be yourself, created in the image of God, to be the images of God in creation, to image God, if you will, if we can turn that into a verb, to image God in everything and to everyone around us, to stand in the place of God, to be like God, to look like God, so that when people look at us, they get glimpses of God himself refracted through our own personalities and gifts and passions. We are the tselem, the image of God. So what would happen if we all adopted that definition of ourselves? What would happen if we adopted that definition of what it means to be human and we believed it, not only in how we view ourselves and what we come to expect of ourselves, how we see ourselves, but how we view every other single human being? And what if we actually sought to live that way? Early in the story, back in the beginning of our time on earth, a great glory was bestowed upon us. All of us, men and women, were created in the image of God, living icons of the living God. We were, in G.K. Chesterton's phrase, statues of God walking about in the garden, endowed with strength and beauty all our own. We were glorious. Which makes what happens next in the story so extremely tragic and frustrating and heartbreaking. The man and the woman, they're referred to in the story as Adam and Eve, but in the Hebrew language, Adam and Eve are not names. Those aren't proper names. No character is ever named those two things. They're the words for human and life. So human and life are then placed in this garden utopia called Eden, which means delight, to rule, to actively partner with God in taking the world somewhere, to making things better, to bring order and beauty out of chaos in this symbiotic way with one another and with creation itself. And there's a line that's used to describe them in all of their innocence and in all of their authenticity, that they were naked and unashamed. And in other words, there's nothing hidden. There's no reason to hide. There's nothing like, I'm going to show you this part of myself, but I'm going to keep this part of myself to myself because I'm afraid of what you might think of it. There's no reason to hide. There is no false self as the story begins. But Adam and Eve, human and life, they don't subdue and they don't rule over the beast. Instead, there's this mysterious beast, a serpent, who subdues them and deceives them, convinces them to turn against this creator God that we met in the early part of the story and to determine for themselves what will be good and evil for themselves. And don't we all want to do that? To determine for ourselves what is right and wrong for us, what is good and bad for us. And if you do this, the serpent says, and then you will be like God, and then you will level up. But if you know the story, and it's a famous story, it doesn't really turn out as gloriously as they had hoped, and they end up hiding and covering and blaming and posturing and spinning and half-truthing. And in that moment in the story, the false self is born. The false self, which David Benner, in his book, The Gift of Being Yourself, he refers to it like the false self is the tragic result of trying to steal something from God that we did not have to steal. Trying to steal something from God that we did not have to steal, and trying to gain more than the everything that God offers. We end up with less than nothing. And the great irony to the serpent's lie, the great irony to the lie that if Eve would take this knowledge of good and evil for herself, then she would be like God. The great deception is she already was. She already was the image of God in creation, and so was the Adam. And so as a result, there's this great darkness called sin with maybe a capital S, this power or this darkness that enters the story, and it infects everything, and it infects everyone. And this now is just the reality of our humanity. Glorious and fallen, good and bad together, as we talked about a couple of weeks ago in our Mind Trap series, and yet the story never gives up on us. It never gives up on us that throughout the story, writers and poets and prophets will again and again drop down into this idea or this ideal. So for example, Psalm 8, the writer David, the poet David, he says something I think we can probably all relate to. He asks a question that I bet you've wondered about, and here's how he phrases it. When I consider the heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars which you've set in place. I don't know if you've ever looked up at the night sky or looked out over a sunset over an ocean and just thought to yourself, I am so small. I am so insignificant. How in the world, if there is a being capable of doing this, how could I ever be important to that being? And that's what this psalm is expressing. Like, what is humankind, back up, what is humankind that you are mindful of them? Human beings, literally the sons of Adam, human beings that you would even care for them. And then he says this, you have made them a little lower than the angels and crowned them with glory and honor. I want us to read that phrase out loud together, only I want you to replace them with us because we are the humans. Let's say this together. And crowned us with glory and honor. You made them rulers over the works of your hands. You put everything under their feet. John Eldredge, in his classic little book, Epic, comments on this psalm right here, saying, I dare say we've heard a bit about original sin, but not nearly enough about original glory, which comes before sin and is deeper to our nature. Not nearly enough about what is first about us and truer and deeper about who we really are. Original glory crowned with glory and honor. This is what is most true about you. This is what is most deeply true about your truest nature, what is most real about you, my real self, the me that I'm created to be. The image of God, crowned with glory and honor, created to image God or to represent God, the glory, the dignity, the efficacy, the courage, the power, the goodness, the grace, the generosity of God throughout all of creation to everything and everyone. That's the real me. That's who I really am. That's what it means to be human. And then there's this moment in the prophet Daniel, Daniel 7, and he too is building on that opening story back in the early pages of Genesis. And he's got this vision, and in this vision, these beasts are coming out of the sea and they're destroying and devouring everything. The beasts represent human kingdoms, only they're called beasts, not human, because what they're doing is the antithesis of what it means to be human. It is beneath what it means to be human. Humans living as images of God. Everything is wrong about what they're doing, and yet we see it every single day. And then in his vision, Daniel sees the throne of God being brought in, and this is so key, and a human who's referred to as one like a son of man. One like a son of man. In other words, a truly human one. A human one approaches the throne and he's given dominion and glory and royal power, and these beasts are subdued and put down. And the whole scene is just leaning into this ideal of what it means to be truly human and what it would look like if a true human ever showed up. And then Jesus comes. And though people are often wondering if he's the long-awaited Messiah, if he's like the final king, the anointed king who's going to bring justice and peace to everything, the title that Jesus seems to prefer for himself is this one right here, Son of Man, a.k.a. human. Just call me human. And it's like he's showing us over and over and over and over again what it looks like to be truly human. What it looks like to actually be ourselves, the glory and the dignity and the love and the attachment, the generosity, the mindfulness, the goodness, the efficacy of what it would look like if we walk through this world like true human beings. No wonder that when some of the first followers of Jesus sought to describe who Jesus really was, what he really represented, they take us back to that scene in Genesis 1, and they use language like this. The Son is the image of the invisible God. He's the image of God. The Son is the radiance of God's glory, the exact likeness or representation of his being, the image, the exact likeness of the invisible God. Meaning, on the one hand, as the image of God, he's showing us what God is like. And the early followers of Jesus talk like this all the time, that in everything Jesus is doing, how he's talking with people, how he's engaging people, especially the people you least expect God to care about, we're seeing what God's like. He's communicating and demonstrating what our Heavenly Father is actually like so that we could know for ourselves and not go about wondering what God is like. But on the other hand, and don't miss this, as the Son of Man, as the image of God, he is at the same time showing us what human is like, showing us what it means to be a human being. In fact, the early followers of Jesus begin to refer to him as the second Adam. The second human. What if? What if in watching Jesus and like reading the stories about him and kind of walking through his life and seeing what he does, what if we're actually seeing what a human life was always supposed to be? What it was always supposed to be like to be us, the kind of power, and again, I love this word, efficacy, the kind of courage and love and healthy boundaries and attentiveness and attachment, the deep connection with God, our Creator, our Heavenly Father, and life and people, the joy, the enjoyment, the significance, not less human, more human than any other human being has ever been before. And when we're invited into this journey of faith, this journey of following Jesus, the invitation isn't just to become more like Jesus or to become more like God, which it is because, hey, we're the images of God, of course, but it is at the same time an invitation to become more human, more truly ourselves, more like our real self really is, the we that we are created to be, which is who we really are, the images of God, filled with glory and nobility and dignity and love. Now, there is a major obstacle that needs to be addressed when we talk about this, and we will address it next week in part B of this message, so do not miss next week. But today I want to end with just some implications of this for our lives. Like, if that is true, what does that mean, like as men, as dads on a Father's Day, but really for all of us, male and female, created in the image of God? What does it look like? What does it look like to live as the images of God for real? And so as we wrap up, I want to just touch down into a few facets of life where we, I think, need to learn and really must learn to live into this calling of who we are. The first being in our work. And by this, I mean that as broadly as possible, whatever we do as work, whatever work is for us. Now, interestingly, this is how the language of ruling is most immediately applied in Genesis. In the story, God puts humans in the garden to work it and to keep it. Now, I don't know if you know this, but when God did that, Eden wasn't done. Eden was not complete. We think of it as like this perfect utopia. It was good, but it wasn't finished. Just started. The raw materials were all there, and God left it unfinished so that the humans could rule in his place and carry it forward. It's what it means to actively partner with God, to subdue the chaos and cultivate and grow things and shape things, to partner with God in carrying the world somewhere. And God, it's like God says to Adam and Eve, a human in life, like, hey, here's the stuff. It's good, but it's not done. Here's the raw materials. Go for it. Just go for it. Take it further. Use creativity. Use your ingenuity to problem solve, to figure things out. Irrigate and plant and grow and shape. You do it. You do it in my place, as my tselem in the garden. So whatever your work may be, like wherever that is, whatever that is, what if you were to never again see yourself as some kind of cog in a wheel, some kind of slot filler? And what if instead of waiting for someone else to bring dignity to you or bring dignity to what you do, what if you just assumed it? What if you just assumed it and you brought it because you are the image of God right there, and you just brought divine dignity to everything and everyone you touched? What if that's what you saw your role as primarily being? Whether you're a server in a restaurant or like you're a barista at a coffee place, bringing the nectar of life to people who need life. How much in the image of God is that? Or if you're a teacher, hey, if you're a teacher, you already know your primary job is to bring order out of chaos, right? It's like, this is what it is. This is where we're going. Nurse, same thing. See, you're bringing order to chaos. Construction, you're in building or design. You're an artist. You're a gardener. What are you doing? You're bringing order and beauty to chaos, and you're subduing it, right? You're ruling. You're partnering with God to bring the world somewhere. And wouldn't you agree that just thinking that way would be a tectonic shift in how many of us think about work, not as a curse, not as something to put your days in until you don't have to do it anymore, but actually as one of the primary ways we live out the image of God, which is who we are. And then a second facet of our lives would be our home life. And some of us live alone. Many of us live with and around some other people. And this one is essential. To live as the image of God, to live as the images of God, partners with him in bringing creation forward. That includes how we live with and treat the people who are nearest to us, how we propel them forward, how we bring out the best in them. In our home life, I think to live as in the image of God, one of the primary things is to see part of our role as revealing or unearthing, uncovering, drawing out, revealing the image of God in the people that we live with and around. Like whether that's my 3-year-old and maybe there's a whole lot of chaos happening there, or my 13-year-old, or my mom or my spouse. They may not always be acting like the image of God that they are. It is often hidden under layers, and do not miss next week, tarnished beneath layers. But God keeps saying, that's who they really are. That's who they really are. That's who I made them to be. And Jesus had this amazing way of treating people as who they were created to be, not necessarily as how they were acting. There's a famous story of the sculptor Michelangelo. And I've actually seen a few versions of this. I think he said this kind of thing more than once as he's describing his process of sculpting these great works of art. And one of the things he was known to say, how he viewed what he did, is like, every block of marble already has the tselem, the image, the statue inside it. It's already there, and my job is simply to remove from it, to carve away everything that is not the image, everything that is the superfluous material. Now, isn't that a beautiful idea? Isn't that kind of cool? And what if that's true of you? What if that's true of everyone around you? The tselem is already there. The image is already there. And what if that's what God is trying to do with you? What if that's the process that you're in, that we're all in? And what if part of being the image of God and partnering with God in our homes is that we partner with God in doing that as well, in revealing and drawing out the image of God in the people that we live with and live around? And then you just ripple that out into further circles, further social circles, like in our relating and our community and around the community. This is huge. This is such a big idea. Implicit to the whole story, going all the way back to Genesis, implicit to the whole story, and how all original hearers of this story would have understood it, is this idea that the way you treat a God's tselem is the way you treat the God. The way you treat a God's image, the way you treat a God's statue, that is actually the way you treat the God. And to disrespect an idol or a temple in the ancient world, that was considered like an atrocious, horrible, shameful thing to do, because to disrespect a tselem is to disrespect the God, because the image represents the God. And the same is true for us. That we treat, the true of the way that we treat people, that we begin to treat every other human being like we would treat God himself. Whether they are looking like God in that moment or not, we just see part of our role is, this is the tselem of God, and I am going to treat that with the dignity and nobility that the image of God deserves, because that's how I view God. This is a major theme in Jesus' teaching. He says this kind of thing all the time. You cannot say you love God if you are treating the person in front of you who is the image of God poorly. That just does not compute. You're lying only to yourself. And in the same way, in loving people who are the image of God, you're actually loving God, because that's the tselem of God. Now, can you imagine? Can you just imagine for a moment if God following people, and I just want to use that like some air quotes around that, if God following people throughout the centuries had treated every human being as the images of God, as kings and queens walking about on this earth, whether they looked that way in the moment or not. Can you imagine how different history would be if people who called themselves God-following or Christ-following people had always done that? Can you imagine what a difference it might make if we just started doing that right now? Like just us, the people in this room, if we began to treat every other human being like we would treat God himself, whether they're behaving that way or not. And then one more, and we could do like a number of these. But I'll end with this one. In our character, simply put, to be who we really are. If we are the images of God, if you really are the image of God, like, let's act like that. Let's live with, treat ourselves with, and carry ourselves with the kind of dignity and courage and grace and efficacy that my station in life requires of me. Living up to, listen, not trying to be something I'm not trying to live, become something I could never be, but becoming or being who I already am, who God says I actually already am, the real me, what is truest about me, crowned with glory and honor. Now, of course, again, there's a major, major obstacle to this that needs to be addressed, and we will pick it up right there next week, and part B, do not miss next week. But as we end here on Father's Day weekend, whatever your definition of manhood, whatever comes to your mind when you think about what it means to be a real woman or what it means to be a real man, what if it just began with this baseline? With this baseline right here, this definition of what it actually means to be a human, created in the image of God and crowned with glory and honor. And what would happen if we adopted that definition as our own and we believed it, not only in how we view ourselves and what we expect of ourselves, but how we viewed every other single human being? And what if we actually sought to live that way? Men, I'll speak specifically to men. It's Father's Day weekend. This Father's Day, listen, that's our challenge for the day. Let's be glorious out there, okay? Let me close this in prayer. Heavenly Father, my mind is blown. It's just hard for me to even wrap my head around or be grateful enough for how you see us, how you see me so much better than I often see myself. As I look at everything that's messed up and broken about me, and you see through all of that to what is deepest and truest and realest about me. And We just can't thank you enough for always calling us to our higher, like that higher version of ourselves, seeing us as we really are, and actually going the distance to bring about that in our lives. And so I pray for myself, I pray for all of us, but definitely for myself as I go into the rest of this day and this week ahead, that I really would adopt your definition of human for myself, that I would believe it, that we would believe it, and that it would transform the way we see ourselves when we look at ourselves in the mirror, what we expect of ourselves, and then it would transform the way we see everybody else around us and how we treat the people who are closest to us and the people who cross the aisle of issues with us and every other way in our communities, that we would live this way. We would live with this vital information deep in our cores. And I pray that for all of us in Jesus' name, amen.